Hello. The weather's awful outside, so we're making cookies today. So, fun fact about me. I used to be a professional baker for a couple years until I am no longer a professional baker. Today we're just going to be making some good old-fashioned chalky chip cookies. I may or may not have been taking a little inspiration from my baker job, but no one can get mad at me because you can't copyright a recipe, so don't come after me because you can't. Because I am taking some inspiration from this recipe, it is going to be scaled down from 80 quarts of dough. Measurements might be a little weird, but bear with me and hopefully this turns out okay because I'm not too sure, but I'm the professional baker, so who knows what I should know.
For this recipe, we have some very basic ingredients. You will need all-purpose flour, brown sugar, white sugar, eggs, butter, preferably unsalted, baking soda, baking powder, cornstarch, salt, vanilla extract, and chocolate chips of your choice. We start off by adding 1.5 cups or 3 sticks or 340 grams of cold, salted butter to our stand mixer with a paddle attachment. If your butter isn't cold, that's fine, it's just kind of recommended for this recipe. Also, if you don't have a stand mixer, a hand one works too. Quick side note, this recipe has slightly less salt because I'm using salted butter. If you're using unsalted butter, just use 2 teaspoons or 11 grams of salt. We'll start the speed off slow to break down the butter and gradually increase the speed so we can whip the butter until we reach a light and fluffy texture. It just takes about a few minutes. After that, we scrape the sides of the bowl in the paddle and we'll add 1 1/3 cup or 266 grams of brown sugar, as well as 3/4 of a cup or 150 grams of white sugar. And then we start mixing that slowly in with our butter. Just like we did the first time, we'll gradually increase the speed to incorporate the sugars and also whip them with the butter to keep the fluffy texture like so. Scrape the bowl and paddle, and now we add 3 eggs along with 2 teaspoons or 10 milliliters of vanilla extract.
Well, people always say to crack it on a flat surface, but honestly,
Mix until combined or until there are a few streaks of yellow egg yolk. This is just a thing I do personally, but I add all of my leaveners to the flour before adding it to the rest of the dough. We have 6 cups or 750 grams of flour with 2 1/4 teaspoons or 7.5 grams of baking soda, 1 teaspoon or 5 grams of cornstarch, 1 teaspoon or 5 grams of salt, and 1 teaspoon or 5 grams of baking powder added.
oops.
We'll add half of the dry ingredients to our bowl and mix until just combined. Adding the rest of our flour, we'll throw in 1 pound or 16 ounces of milk chocolate chips. Mixing that together, we're looking for a soft yet not sticky consistency, just like so. Also, if any of my metric conversions are wrong, please double check and feel free to let me know. Now that we have our dough finished, we're not rolling them into a ball. We're a professional here. Let me show you how to make your cookies look nice. We're going to need a scale for this part. If you don't have one, that's totally fine. Just kind of eyeball it if you want. First, we weigh out 2 ounces of dough and split it evenly down the middle like this. Next, we'll take the 2 halves and push them together. You can see that as I push the dough together, I kind of roll it in my hands, and that's the key to get it to combine. We're bringing the dough together, people. We're not forcing it, so you don't need to use lots of pressure. Now that the cookie is formed, we'll just drop or tap it gently on the counter to flatten the bottom. You don't need to throw it like your controller when you lose a game of Fortnite. We'll do the same process to all of our cookies, which might take a little bit of time, unless you're like me who apparently doesn't need a scale because I can just somehow perfectly weigh 2 ounces of dough. Thank you, 2 years of this. That's sarcasm. Now, most people will throw their cookies on a sheet and straight into the oven after making the dough. That's perfectly reasonable, but you'll need to adjust your temperature or baking time depending. In my case, I'm putting them in a container and letting them freeze overnight. Don't do what I did here and stack them. This is a horrible idea. Just don't do this, and it'll ruin the tops of your cookies. The reason we're freezing them is so that when we bake them, they won't flatten as much since they aren't room temp. Just space them evenly on a cookie sheet with parchment and bake at 335 degrees Fahrenheit or 168 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. Those instructions are for frozen dough. Keep an eye on your cookies if you're baking at this temperature and time with room temperature dough. Halfway through, we'll just rotate our pan and finish baking. These ones I have on the tray are slightly weird because they were kind of stacked, and they were versions of the recipe before fine-tuning and finalizing some things, but they still tasted good. That will do it for today's video. It was really spontaneous if you couldn't tell, but at least you have a dank cookie recipe now.
Bro, these are hot. freaking good.